All right, today we're jumping into a fascinating piece of commentary from a Fox News segment. They're talking about a massive claimed counter-narcotics victory. And what we're going to do is break down exactly how they build their argument piece by piece. Okay, so the whole thing kicks off with this just an absolutely explosive claim. The capture of the Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro, who they say is now in jail. I mean, this one statement is the bedrock for everything else they're about to say. It immediately sets the scene. This is a huge, decisive blow against drug trafficking into the United States. So you've got this massive claim on the table, right? The very first thing the argument does is show you why it matters so much. And they do that by focusing on the immediate, really celebratory reaction from the guest on the show. And that first reaction, it's all about national unity. The guest calls the whole thing outstanding for all Americans. You see what that does? It instantly takes it out of the political realm and frames it as a win for everybody, for the whole country.
And you gotta pay attention to the words they use here. They're super emotional, spectacular, exceptional. But what's really interesting is who gets the praise. The Department of War. Now that's a term we haven't officially used since the 1940s. Choosing that specific phrase paints this whole thing in these really stark military colors. It's not just police work anymore. This is something bigger.
Okay, so that naturally leads us to the core theme of this whole commentary, which is all about the president's leadership. And to really hammer this point home, they introduced this very specific, kind of catchy phrase.
And there it is, the president of action. The speaker lays out a really clear definition, right? This is someone who does things, who takes decisive action, not just another politician who talks about it. They specifically contrast this with, quote, 20-some years of what they call inaction from others. So you get this really sharp before and after picture.
But then, the argument widens the circle of credit. It's not just about one person. The success is painted as this big, well-oiled machine with all these different parts. The DEA, the FBI, the intelligence community, all working together, perfectly in sync. It comes across as this huge, coordinated government push. All right, so they've claimed this major action took place. But what did it actually do? What were the results on the ground? Well, this is where the argument shifts gears and starts hitting us with some hard numbers to try and quantify just how successful this whole operation was.
And the first number they throw out is a big one, a really powerful one, 90%. The claim is that they've managed to stop a full 90% of the drugs flowing into the US. I mean, a number that high, that specific, it's designed to sound final, right? To make the policy's success seem almost absolute.
Now, to back up that huge 90% claim, the argument drills down to a more specific example. They focus on fentanyl and claim that its flow has been cut in half. It creates a really simple and powerful before and after story for anyone watching.
But, numbers can feel pretty abstract. So to make this all feel real and personal, the speaker tells a story. They talk about an apartment complex in Colorado that was, in their words, taken over by the monsters. Calling them monsters, that's a really powerful choice of words, isn't it? It frames the whole thing as this battle of good versus evil and connects those big, high-level policy claims to something scary that could be happening right in your own community. So from that one specific event and that one personal story, the argument then kind of zooms out. It starts to frame this not as a one-off thing, but as a key piece of a much, much broader strategy. One that's looking at problems both overseas and right here at home.
And this really lays out the global chessboard as the speaker sees it. So you've got Venezuela, the main threat that's just been taken out, but they're quick to point out that the fight isn't over. They then pivot to Colombia, talking about its cocaine production, and then to China, which they identify as the source of these very deadly chemicals like fentanyl.
And this is where the argument makes a really interesting turn. The speaker basically splits the whole problem in two. You've got the supply side, that's where they say all these successful actions are happening. But then you have the demand side, which, according to them, has been completely disregarded for many years. So they're framing this new approach as fixing a huge mistake from the past.
And that brings the whole argument right back to our own backyard. The speaker points to addiction and mental health issues here in America as the big missing piece of the puzzle. The point they're making is crystal clear. You can fight the international supply all you want, but if you don't also address the demand at home, you're only fighting half the war.
So you take all these different pieces we've just walked through, the big, decisive action, the impressive sounding stats, this whole two-sided strategy, and it all builds up to one final, overarching political point. And this is it. This is the big takeaway of the entire segment.
The speaker's final conclusion is that this whole event is proof, definitive proof, that America First politics are working. The entire success story we just heard is tied directly to a very specific political philosophy.
And it all wraps up with a kind of call to action for the audience. The message is, you should be proud of the military's bravery, and you should go online and watch videos of Venezuelan citizens who, they claim, are celebrating this news all around the globe.
So, when you step back, the argument we've just broken down tells a really clear, very powerful story of success. And it kind of leaves us with a big question to think about, right? How do these kinds of narratives, these stories of decisive action with clear heroes, clear villains, and neat and tidy results, how do they end up shaping the way we all understand really complex, messy international issues?